All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Thursday, September 19th, and this is All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson, along with Jake Jimerson, and we have a very fun show for you today. Today's episode, what we're going to be doing is kind of comparing where Texas is in the SEC through 3 weeks of play going into week 4, right before conference play, and kind of see where Texas measures up. I think everybody kind of knows they're the number one team in the country. They look like the best team in the country through 3 weeks. It's hard to deny that they really don't have a glaring weakness. I mean, Jake, you and I very early on in this show, in the first week of this show, before week 1 of the regular season, one of our biggest concerns was punter. So whenever that's one of your biggest concerns, you're probably going to be a very good football team. That's where Texas is right now. But we're going to kind of go through and look at some very interesting team stats through the SEC and kind of see where Texas measures up in their inaugural season. And then look at some other teams as well, like an OU. Where does OU measure? Where are some of the cream of the crop teams? Ole Miss, Tennessee looking very good through 3 weeks, but haven't really played anybody. We're just going to kind of compare and contrast and kind of see and have that conversation. We're also going to talk a little bit about Quinn Ewers' draft stock. Some news came out that he now has the best odds in the country for that number 1 overall pick that looks to be like the Carolina Panthers. We will get into that. And then also we'll finish the show off with some games of the week going on in the country in week 3. Some very good games, some very good SEC games, including one from the dreaded rival Oklahoma and Tennessee. That ought to be a very interesting game. And I think I've got a couple of viewpoints that Texas fans may not necessarily love going into that if you're rooting for Tennessee. So without further ado, let's go ahead, get into the show. Jake, let's kind of talk about Quinn Ewers first, and then we'll kind of dive into those SEC talks. I feel like that's going to be the meat and potatoes of the show for the most part. That's going to be the majority of our conversation. So Quinn Ewers comes out as the number 1 overall, best odds to be the number 1 overall draft pick in next year's draft. What do you have to say about him possibly, likely going to the Carolina Panthers, God forbid any type of injuries or anything like that come up that might affect his draft stock?
Well, and there are still a lot of mocks where Carson Beck's going first as well, but if Quinn Ewers was to go first in the draft, and I think I was talking with you a little earlier about this in the day, but I almost hope he pulls an Eli Manning. That organization, I know a lot of Texas fans are gonna be like, well, you want him to go number 1. Well, you don't want him to go number 1 and be a bust because the organization is the Carolina Panthers. And that's an organization who loves firing their head coaches after 1 season and is already giving up on Bryce Young, just 18 games, right?
Yeah.
How many I think he's played?
I believe so. Yeah. I believe he started from week 1 a season ago as a rookie. He's played 2 games up to this point. So, and then I think he missed a game last year because of an injury or something. So that would, the math would add up that it's around 18 games. Jake, the Bryce Young situation is strange to me because at no point did he really ever look like he's in command or control of the offense. I've seen some rookies, or I've seen some young quarterbacks be on a very bad football team and yet still look like they are the guy. And Bryce Young, to me, never really felt like or looked like the guy. And I know he's set up in a very bad situation at Carolina. There is no talent around him. The GMs and coaches have done him no favors in terms of putting him in a scheme or a game plan that would benefit his skill set and elevate his play style and the talents that he does have, while also trying to work behind the scenes on elevating maybe some of his weaknesses. I don't believe he's had any of that support. So I'm not necessarily blaming Bryce Young. I also feel like there's got to be a limit. And I kind of credit the Carolina Panthers to a point of saying, you know what, if we don't think you're the guy, or we know you're not the guy, let's not drag this out. let's just cut ties where it is. This will be his last season. If he's benched now, it'll be a Zach Wilson situation and he'll go somewhere else.
I actually disagree with you on this. I'm not going to give the Carolina Panthers credit for anything. When you're an organization that's fired your head coach after one season, 3 straight seasons in a row, and I mean, I think pretty much
Matt Rule was
everyone's
there
heard the
for
stories.
Matt
Yeah,
Rule was
he was there for
for
he was there
2
for
years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Then they fired their next head coach, and I believe they had fired another one, and I wouldn't be surprised if they fire this one at the end of the year.
I don't even know
And
who their coaches have been since Matt Rule.
yeah, they've gone through too many. And David Tapper is, or I believe that's the owner, is
David Tepper.
We've all heard some nightmare stories about how he likes to micromanage, and he thinks because that worked in business, it's going to work with an NFL team. I don't think we've seen a rookie QB be on such a bad team and then also have to have a different offensive coordinator and head coach to start both his seasons to beginning.
So let me ask you, Jake, do you think that there is a place for Bryce Young in this league as a starting quarterback?
I mean, he could probably go to San Francisco and be better than Brock Purdy.
You really? You think so?
I think he has a better skill set. I mean, if you watch his college tape, if you get him behind an offensive line that can block for at least a couple seconds, because his offensive line in Carolina, it's like the Bears right now. You snap the ball and he's under pressure immediately. I'm not saying he would, but I'm saying if he went to San Francisco and he was a backup, I bet he could impress and have a chance at something.
I'm not.
That. I'm not saying he would.
I can't buy into that.
We've only seen him for a year in the pros. He was the first pick of the draft for a reason. Carolina's the most inept organization in the NFL.
Okay, I will agree with that. I'm not going to defend their GM or the talent acquisitions that they've made while Bryce Young, or even before Bryce Young, to acquire any type of talent. Any talent they did have in Christian McCaffrey, they let slip through their fingers and absolutely or a DJ Moore, and they've gotten absolutely nothing for those players. My thing is, though, is like to me, this feels eerily similar to a Josh Rosen situation in Arizona. It was like, yeah, you gave him a season, but he did absolutely nothing to impress you in those seasons. And yes, those were some bad Arizona teams, but then you go out and get a Kyler Murray and you end up making the playoffs in a season or two after that. Like, you can turn it around if you get your guy. Now, that comes with getting the right head coach. That comes with getting some of the right players, and that comes with drafting somebody who is going to be able to We've seen this Carolina Panthers franchise thrive and be very successful, whether that be with Cam Newton or whoever, and it's been under the same management. So I believe they can at least
not the same owner.
Not okay, yeah, because they did just recently sell to David Tepper.
I think the owner is the issue. And can you even tell me a Carolina wide receiver right now?
I think Thielen is still out there. I think Adam Thielen is still a wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. That's a guess.
The fact, and I don't even know if that's true this year. So the fact that that's the only name, I'm just saying, you could put Patrick Mahomes on Carolina and they would still suck. We've spent too much time on this already, but I think it's fun because we don't always disagree on much when it comes to football. I'm not saying he would go, and I'm not saying it's a for sure deal like San Francisco should get rid of Brock Purdy and take him. I'm just saying if he went to San Francisco, I think he gets to be really good. I mean, we're not that far removed from him being the top college prospect as a quarterback, pretty much unquestionably.
Yeah, he would have to go. Now, I think if he was a backup for Patrick Mahomes at Kansas City,
how about
he
Miami?
got in, and I think if see, here we go now. Now, this is a conversation that if Tua can no longer play, say Tua is out for an extended period, why doesn't Carolina just trade him to Miami this season and actually get something for him?
Yeah,
instead of letting him walk.
If you're Miami, it's another lefty, and it'd be great insurance for Tua, especially because you're probably not going to have to give up a crazy amount to get someone who was just the first pick. Now, cap wise, I don't know how it'd work out, but just in theory, if he can't succeed at Miami as the quarterback, he's not going to succeed anywhere. But I bet he could go to that offense and functionally run it. He would have one of the best receiving cores in the NFL, but maybe this is a teaser and that'll actually happen because I could see Miami being aggressive like that. I don't think they want to just fold and go away if Tua can't play for a while.
Well, Tua is officially on the IR, so that's at least another 4 weeks that he's not going to be playing since they put him on. So I'll be very interested to see. I like that. I like that hypothetical. Maybe somebody in the NFL is listening and they'll pull the trigger on that and make that happen because I do think it'll be interesting. Do I think Quinn Ewers will, to bring this back around, do I think Quinn Ewers will succeed at Carolina with the current Carolina Panthers roster that they currently have right now with the head coaches and all the things? No, I do not. I think it would be a terrible fit. It would be a disaster for really any quarterback. Unless maybe you get a Carson Beck to go there and you make, or I would put Quinn up there as a possibility of turning a franchise around, but you would have to make the right trades and the right moves in the offseason with free agents coming in and making some big signs. And like, I'm talking, get a young head coach that can work with Quinn, not some old school defensive minded guy or whatever. It would have to be a Mike McDaniel type coach to go into Carolina and then get the players and acquire the players necessary to help somebody like Quinn Ewers succeed in his rookie or second year.
Yeah, anyone from the Shanahan coaching tree is the perfect fit for Quinn Ewers. That style of offense, that's very similar to what the Longhorns run. You know, Sark is friends with Shanahan. He's friends with McDaniel. He works with them in the offseason to create new plays. So I think that would be a good transition for Ewers. And if he is going to go to a franchise that's rebuilding and possibly hiring a new coach, if I was that franchise, I would go for someone who runs, you know, the Kyle Shanahan core as their offense.
All right, Jake, let's go ahead and turn the tides here. Let's do a couple of compare and contrast and look at the SEC as an entire conference through 3 weeks of play going into week 4 and some team stats. Right now, Texas leads the SEC in yards after catch, that yak yardage at 680. Ole Miss, number 2, who has the number 1 offense, or number 2 offense, I beg your pardon, in the SEC with 639, and Georgia at number 3 with 486. So it shows you kind of the styles of these teams. Texas is getting a lot of guys on the run and allowing them to go after the catch, whereas Tennessee maybe is throwing the ball a lot. They're putting up a ton of yardage and leading the SEC in yards per game through actually, no, that is Ole Miss. Yeah, Tennessee has the number 1 offense. I beg your pardon. So, Tennessee has the number 1 offense. And so it kind of looks like Tennessee's just getting a bunch of yards and not really running after the catch as much. It's a lot of, timing routes and screens and things like that. Whereas Texas is spreading the ball around and they're getting their guys in open space.
Yeah, and it just shows kind of, Sark's scheme. It's all about motion, right? It's all about getting their playmakers the ball where they can make a run. And we only mentioned the top 3 schools as far as yak. After Georgia, it continues to drop off. And I think Kentucky was last with, I believe, 100 total yards after the catch.
Jeez, that's so terrible.
To show you the vast difference from last place to first in the SEC with yards after the catch. And I think Oklahoma was like 3rd to last, and they were around getting closer to 200. And so there's quite a big difference once you get out of that group of, like Alabama. Who else was I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but there was
you've got after Tennessee, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Texas are the top 4 scoring offenses. And then Arkansas, Auburn, and Vanderbilt actually round out the next 3 behind Texas.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I was kind of looking it up while you were talking about it, because I thought in my head, it feels like Texas has probably ran less plays in a game than those teams. And that was true. Texas is 44th in the nation in total plays run in a game, while Tennessee was up in the top 20. So was Ole Miss, I think, was in the top 10. So if you break it down by a per play metric, I think Texas would be more around probably second or third if you took that metric and got a little bit more detailed into it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point to make. So, and people need to keep these things in mind whenever they're just trying to spew out stats in terms of trying to make their teams look as good as possible, because you are going to get overloaded information when it comes to an Ole Miss or a Tennessee, because they're running so many plays, and they're also just kicking onside kicks while they're up by 30, and they're trying to just get these bumps up because they know they're going to need these stats. They're going to need these scores when it comes to getting into a playoff with at-large bids within their programs, because they know that they're probably not favorites to win the SEC. They're going to be trying to be one of the best 12 teams in the country when it comes to getting into the playoffs, and they're going to need a very impressive resume. And this is one way to include into your resume that you're one of the better teams in the country.
Yeah, and kind of we were talking about this right before the podcast, but also Texas isn't kicking onside kicks when they're up by 30 against a bad group of 5 team. I can't believe Tennessee did that.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, I had mentioned that, and so it's just ridiculous that a team will do that. But then and you look defensively as well. Ole Miss has the number 1 defense in the SEC. Tennessee at number 2, Georgia at number 3. This is scoring defenses. Texas is there at number 4, and Missouri at number 5. That's not going to stay. Missouri is not going to be one of the top scoring defenses. And so it's a little premature to look at it, but I think it's just an interesting kind of take and seeing where teams line up at this point in the season. Also, some interesting stats that I found was that Texas offensively, yards per game, they are 4th. Defensively and yards allowed per game is 4th. Rushing yards gained, they're 9th. Rushing yards allowed, they're 9th. And they're number 2 in passing behind Ole Miss. But Texas seems to be more so than any of these other teams, where you can even look at a Georgia, or you can look at an Ole Miss, or you can look at an Alabama, where at some point either their passing yards are going to be up here or their rushing yards are going to be up here, and it's going to differentiate between their passing yards up here, their rushing yards down here. Texas is balanced almost in every statistical category. They're even with what they're allowing and with what they're giving up, what they're doing in the passing game compared to what they're doing in the rushing game offensively, what they're allowing defensively, what they're allowing in the rushing game defensively. And so Texas is one of the more balanced teams all around statistically through 3 weeks. And I think that is where a lot of the polling information, because you can see it on the field as well. I mean, it makes sense. It translates on the field into the stat sheet as well, that a lot of the voters, I believe, are also seeing what Texas is doing. And they're like, yeah, that's the most balanced team. That's the best team in the country right now.
Yeah. And what's impressive about that too is Texas has really been pass first, and they haven't really wanted to give the running backs much run. In fact, the freshman Gibson is the one who's leading the team in carries right now. And that's not something we all would have expected, but it's kind of become out of necessity, because with Jaden Blue going down, already being down Baxter, and already being down Christian Clark, it's forced Sark to be really creative in how he's able to keep the run game relevant without trying to risk losing more running backs before they get into SEC play, because you're going to need Jaden Blue in some of those SEC games. You're going to need, at this point, you're going to need Jarrett Gibson. You're obviously going to need Wisner as well. And I think he's really trying to keep that core 3 healthy, so that when they start getting, OU and Georgia back to back, they have that talent there. Because if you lose another one of those guys, you're down to really 2 scholarship running backs and then a graduate transfer that you just brought in a couple weeks ago, basically.
And I think something that's very important to keep in mind, Jake, is the way Texas beat Michigan in that second half. They controlled the clock. They kept their offense on the field. They kept their defense off of the field by running the football, and they wore that defense down. Texas has the capability of doing that they're not going to waste these running backs on UTSA, Colorado State, and UL Monroe, maybe not even a Mississippi State. It is going to be pass first. But whenever you're leading against an Oklahoma or a Georgia, say middle of the third quarter, and your team gets the ball and you're up by 3 points, and you have a 15-play drive of 80 yards and you take 10 minutes off the clock and you end it in a touchdown drive, that is why you're trying to keep these running backs healthy, is because you can play that style of football, and that's the style of football that it's going to take to beat an Oklahoma or a Georgia.
It's the Nick Saban coaching tree.
Yes.
That's the Nick Saban method. He wants to get up big and then choke you out. And that's exactly what Nick Saban did for years, because Alabama, knock on them, especially, towards the latter half when they brought in Sarkisian, ironically, as an offensive coordinator, they wouldn't drop 70, 60 points on these teams. They would win them 52-0, 52, 10, 49 to, 3. They would just win, they would just get ahead, and it would almost be the halftime score.
Yeah.
The halftime score would look like, oh, they're going to hang 100. And then they would just kind of run the football and just take care of the ball and still score points, but just do it in a very slow, methodical fashion. Because at that point, they didn't need to do style points, because you could just look at the product and know they were the best team in the nation. And that's obviously what Texas is trying to do this year. But you can kind of see that Nick Saban influence on Sark. It's funny because people always make fun of the all gas, no brakes, but they call it breaks in the second half. I don't think it's really breaks. I think it's just control and dominance, just in a slower fashion, because you don't need to score 100 points.
Yeah, sometimes you're not driving a Lamborghini, Georgia. Sometimes you're driving a pickup truck, or sometimes you're driving a tractor. Sometimes you're driving a plow truck, and you just can go slow, but nothing's going to stand in your way. And sometimes you don't always need to go 108 on the highway.
Yeah. They need to invest. The NIL there needs to invest into like a racetrack or something.
That would be a great idea for them. Just let it all out. Go buy
might be
a
a
drag
liability
race.
issue.
Sure, but buy a drag race track out in the middle of Athens, Georgia somewhere, and just let these kids fly. Just get it out of their system, so whenever they're actually on the street with other people, they don't have to do it there. Let's go ahead and get into some games of the week this week, Jake. We've got about 8 minutes left. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk about all of them. I'm going to skip ahead to the Tennessee OU game just so we have plenty of time to talk about that. I know we're both going to have a lot of opinions on it. Tennessee at OU. Tennessee is a touchdown favorite right now, over under set at 57.5. At Oklahoma, this is going to be Nico Emilavia. Nico Emilavia.
Nico.
It'll be Nico's first true road game in his career at Norman, Oklahoma. And I think Brent Venables is a defensive-minded team that is actually, I think they're very underappreciated on the defensive side of the ball, and I think he's going to be able to come up with something that's going to throw Nico off a little bit. I know this Tennessee offense has looked like a freight train. They've looked unstoppable. I'll be very intrigued to see if the environment, the atmosphere, and if a couple things go wrong for Nico early in that game, if Oklahoma can't keep it a close game with Tennessee and run with them a little bit in terms of not necessarily having to score a lot of points, because we know Oklahoma cannot do that, but relying on the defense, this will be by far the best defense by far that Tennessee has played all season.
Yeah, this will also be by far the best team Oklahoma has played on the flip side. And before I say what I'm about to say, I will preface it with this. There is the chance that OU is supposedly going to be much healthier for this game. I don't know what all the depth is going to come back. To be honest, I don't care that much about them. But I know they have some linemen coming back. I know that the Nick Anderson, their star receiver, is likely going to be back. So to me, this is now or never for OU. If they go out and they just look like they had the first few weeks, it's going to get ugly, and the stands are going to be emptier than they were against Tulane in the second half.
Oof.
But B, it's going to be a long season for them. And again, everything I'm saying, the OU Texas game, everything flies out the door. I've said my opinion on that game, but with all that said, this game is not going to be close at the end of the game. This game will be close for the first half. I think Tennessee will be leading at half, something like 13-10, something along those lines. And then all of a sudden you're going to blink and it's going to be 37-17 and Tennessee just kind of strolled into the fourth quarter with the lead, knowing they were going to win and end up winning comfortably. I think OU keeps this close early. I'm betting Tennessee. I live in Kansas. It's legal here. I'm betting Tennessee. I'm betting them to cover. I may even bet an alternate spread of 10 to get some extra odds on there. Because I'm going to back up my words with some money. And if I'm wrong, I'll lose the money. But I think Tennessee wins big. And I think it could get uglier than 37-17. But I'm just going to say that so I don't make myself look like a complete idiot.
So I did make the point for Oklahoma, and I think that was just for the fact of if we have any Oklahoma listeners, they can say we were trying to be as unbiased as possible. I do think Tennessee covers. I think they are going to win this game by more than just a score. I believe they win by 2 scores or maybe possibly 3. I could see this kind of happening the way you are explaining it. In terms of it's close, and then we blink and wow, all of a sudden Tennessee is up by 3 touchdowns. How did that happen and how fast did that happen? But yeah, so I would completely agree with you. I think Tennessee takes this one handedly in the fourth quarter. Let's go ahead and hit on Illinois and Nebraska. These are 2 ranked teams, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. This is a 2 ranked team, Illinois and Nebraska coming in on a Friday night, as Nebraska is a 1.5 favorite over Illinois.
Yeah, I like Nebraska in this game. I like Illinois to cover, though. I think 7.5 is just a lot of points. I think sooner or later, Patrick Mahomes Jr. is going to have a game where he doesn't, where he struggles and throws a couple picks. I think this could be that game. I believe it's their first conference game. It's at least their first conference game against a good opponent. And I do think Illinois is a pretty solid program this year, but we talked about Nebraska a lot last episode and how they kind of seem to be taking steps in the right direction now. So I think they're gonna win this game, but I think they're gonna win by probably 3 points or 6 points, something like that. So I'll take Illinois to cover.
Illinois has beaten East Illinois, Kansas is not nearly as good as what people thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. In fact, they've been downright terrible, and they've beaten Central Michigan. Give me Nebraska by 3 touchdowns. I think they go in and they dominate this game. All right, USC at Michigan, Jake. This is a Big Ten game, ladies and gentlemen, a new Big Ten game. USC Trojans traveling into Ann Arbor, taking on the defending national champions. USC is a 5-point favorite on the road. 44.5 on the over-under. Jake, I'll go ahead and take this one. I think Michigan has finally found an identity. They no longer have to worry on whether or not, can we get the passing game going? They can just say, no, the passing game is not going to get going. They have officially announced Orji as the starter, and now they have added a third weapon on the offense who can run the ball and as a running threat. And if you want to get some of the wide receivers involved, run a couple triple option, reverse jet sweeps, whatever it takes. But now you have an identity on offense where you can officially just abandon the passing game. Even if you're down 2-3 scores, Michigan's going to run the ball. I think that actually benefits and helps them in terms of, let's get down to the basics and let's just get down to smash mouth football. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we at least now know who we are.
Yeah, this is what I'm calling my NFL college game of the week. As in, I have no idea who's good in this game.
Yeah.
USC, the LSU win was big. I don't think maybe LSU is as good as we were thinking they were going to be preseason. They haven't played anyone since. They did pitch a shutout. That's impressive for them, but we haven't seen their run defense tested and their undersized D-line tested. But also, I don't think Michigan's offensive line is what it was last year. We've seen them not look very good. And so it's going to be weird because even after this game, I don't think we're going to know who's good. And this is not a game I'm going to bet. I have no confidence in this. I'm going to say USC just because I think they have more, kind of to go back to the paths to victory. I think they probably have more just because they're a little bit more explosive on offense. but it's all going to be decided in the trenches in this game. And I just don't know how that Michigan offensive line matchup is going to go against an improved USC front seven, but not a proven front seven for USC. So I'm going to take USC. I'm not going to take them to cover. I think this is going to be like a 3-point game. I think Michigan will be able to keep it ugly. I do think their offense will be better now that they have an identity for all the points that you mentioned. So I'll take Michigan to cover, but USC to win. But again, I have no confidence in this one. This is not one I'm touching as far as on the gambling side of things.
I've actually got I'm going to take Michigan winning by a game-winning field goal as time expires, and I think it's going to be like 19-16. It'll be something ugly and low scoring. That's the only way they're going to be able to win. If it gets into the 20s or 30s, USC is going to blow them out. So just real quickly, this could win the Big 12, Jake. I think this is a very interesting game. Oklahoma State taking on Utah in Stillwater. Cam Rising is back. Alan Bowman is also the starting quarterback. Between the two of them, they've got like 49 years of life experience playing in a college football game. The middle-aged men are going to be playing quarterback here. That's almost an NFL game when you look at it in an age experience range. But Utah at Oklahoma State. Jake, Ollie Gordon has been a huge disappointment this season and the running game for Oklahoma State. In fact, Oklahoma State has mostly had success this year because of the passing game from Alan Bowman, which is not something I thought I would say this year. Utah has Cam Rising back. They are a much better team with him at quarterback. How do you think this one's going to go?
I'm going to say Utah wins. This is assuming Rising stays healthy. This is kind of a now or never game. Call this the now or never week for the state of Oklahoma, because this is a now or never game for Oklahoma State. If Ollie Gordon doesn't get going in this game and they can't find a way to get their best player more involved in the offense, this is where the wheels are going to start to fall off, because if they have to lean on Bowman, they are just simply not going to be in the Big 12 title game, yet alone win it. And I think we'll know that after this weekend. For Utah, the interesting thing is just this kind of being their first big road trip in the Big 12, and it's going to be a lot more hostile environment than what they saw in the Pac-12. So there's a lot of interesting storylines, but I like Cam Rising. He started his career at Texas. I'm going to take Utah to win, and I'm going to take him to cover because I think they're going to win this game by 2 or 3 possessions.
I'm actually going to take the under in this game. I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of points. In fact, I think if Oklahoma State wants this to be a game that favors them, they'll get Ollie Gordon going and lean on the running game and try to take some of the air out of the football. I am going to take Utah. I think Utah is just an overall better football team in general, but I do think it's going to be a very close, very low scoring game this week in Stillwater. So, Jake, those are some of the games of the week. We got to get going. We are just slightly over time, but there's no penalty in being a little bit over time. But for Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. Hope you enjoyed the show. Like, share, subscribe. Hey, our goal is to get to 200 subscribers. We're currently at 155. We want to get to 200 by SEC week, which is next Saturday before the Mississippi State game. So help us get there. Spread the word. Keep sharing us. Keep liking us, and keep watching. And as always, for your daily fix on all things Texas Longhorns, this is All In Horns. Hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.